Achievement Award recipient. That brings the Hall of Fame total to 34 members. Of course, on the call, we have Howard Johnson, Mr. 30-30. We have Al Leiter, who no Met fan will ever forget the two-hit shutout in Cincinnati in '99. And of course, the legendary voices of the Mets, Howie Rose and Gary Cohen, who joined broadcasters Ralph Kiner, Bob Murphy, and Lindsey Nelson in the Mets Hall of Fame.
Very cool.
And then also on the call, Jay Horowitz, who will become the 5th member of the front office who's been recognized with the Hall of Fame Achievement Award. From that, I'd like to turn it over to have each member say a little bit about what this means to them. And we'll start with Howard Johnson.
Thanks, Ethan. I appreciate it. Congrats to the other guys that are going in, Jay, especially you, buddy. I miss you. And when I got the call, I was in shock, and I'm a little bit emotional, I got to admit, but it was very cool. Thankful for Steve Cohen, thankful for the Mets organization and the people that make it up. And these are people that, we're all part of one family. And it's awesome that we get to see each other and be around each other a little bit. So I'm honored to be going in with these guys.
Great. Al?
Yeah, similar to what Hojo said when Steve called. What a terrific surprise and a great honor. Certainly, anybody on this call or anybody knows that my story and my history, having grown up a Mets fan, I think what really went through my mind was, I think every little boy that dreamt of playing in the big leagues, and Hojo, I'm sure you're right there, you're just grateful and hope that you can make it. And then when that happens and you establish yourself to some degree, there's a next level dream, fantasy, if you will, and it's play for the team that you rooted for as a kid. And it's real. I did. Growing up in the area, my father was a big Mets fan, and all the Leiter boys were to follow. And then I think, drilling down on the Hall of Fame, because I know when I was there with the Mets, I always would take the moment when there was special ceremonies to salute the past players and the history. And I'll be honest, I really didn't look at the guys, both players and also executives and broadcasters that are in. It just makes it even that much more special to think that 1,200 players wore the Mets uniform, and now there's 21, I think, Hojo and I, player wise. I know, Ethan, you said 34, 35 of Hall of Famers. It's a great honor. It's a great recognition. I am truly grateful for what Steve Cohen, Alex Cohen, and Mets ownership has done. I've always thought that the Mets history is a prideful history. A lot of great players and people around the organization. I'm glad that I was asked or told that I'm going to be part of this great group.
Thanks, Al. Gary?
Well, it's rather flabbergasting, I have to say. I think back to spending hundreds of nights sitting on the upper deck at Shea Stadium. Think about Lindsey, Ralph, and Bob under my pillow for West Coast night games. The Mets have been an enormous part of my life. I was a Mets fan from the time I was 6 years old, and I know that Howie feels the same way about this. In many ways, we have been representatives of the millions of people who care deeply about the Mets and have followed them over their 60-odd years. We're fans who got lucky and got a chance to bring our favorite team home to people. And, to go in with Howie, who was like my brother from another mother, and with Howard and Al, who were two of my most favorite people to be around in that clubhouse and to watch perform on the field, I just think this is an incredible honor. And to have Jay alongside as well, who in many ways is the bastion of Mets history and is the touchstone for just about every player who's played for the Mets over the last 40 odd years. this is an honor that I could not have ever anticipated. And honestly, it's so otherworldly and so surreal to me. It kind of takes me back to sitting in the booth with Bob Murphy for 15 years and thinking, wait a second, I'm a 6-year-old kid listening to Bob Murphy under my pillow, and now I'm next to him working with him in the booth. It's that kind of feeling. It's like, I can't even believe this has happened. So my thanks to Steve Cohen and thanks to the Mets organization. And I couldn't be prouder and more honored.
Thank you, Gary. Howie?
Well, so much of what Gary said certainly reflects my feelings. And I just want to reiterate how proud I am to go in with the group that's going in this year, number one. And I can't thank Steve and Alex Cohen enough for everything that they've done to reconnect Mets players and Mets personnel with the history and tradition of this franchise. But, I've got to tell you, I'm paid to speak for a living, and it's very hard for me to properly articulate my feelings here. I know that whenever I ruminate about anything to do with Mets games and specific moments that have been special to the team's history that I've been fortunate enough to broadcast, I've got this, it's kind of it's a default mechanism that I have in my system that immediately takes me back to 1969, to that 15-year-old kid who sat in the upper deck countless times that year, saw that season unfold, and really thought I was living a fairy tale. And those guys, the 1969 Mets, changed my life. I would not be doing what I'm doing, nor certainly would I be on this call today, if not for the 1969 Mets having convinced me that there was nothing you couldn't accomplish if you worked hard enough at it. I guarantee you this, I would not have passed the geometry regents in 1970 if it weren't for the 1969 Mets, because I didn't pass the geometry test all year. And finally, the teacher said to me, hey, look, you're a nice guy. You show up, you post no bills, but you got to pass the test for me to allow you to pass the course. So, my parents got a tutor for me, and I got an 87 on the geometry regents, because when I went into that classroom to take that test, Gil Hodges, 25 players, and his entire coaching staff were in there with me. If not for what they accomplished, I never would have believed and could have dedicated myself to passing that regents. That's what the Mets have meant to me over the course of my life. So to try and put into words what this means to me today is practically impossible.
Well said,
Well
Howie.
said.
Thank you. And Jay?
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. First I want to congratulate Howie, Gary, Hojo, and Al on well-deserved inductions. For me, this is a humbling experience to get a Hall of Fame Achievement Award. I just never thought something like this was possible. When I was playing second base for Epstein's in the Clifton Little League about 70 years ago, making about 3 hours a game, I never thought my name would ever be associated to do anything to do with a Hall of Fame, especially the Mets Hall of Fame. I was a lousy hitter, Al. Sorry. I wanted to thank the Wilpons and Frank Cashin for taking a chance on a kid, a 34-year-old kid out of college. It's been a great 43 years. And I want to have a shout out to Steve and Alex Cohen for being such great supporters of the alumni program. We did a lot of great things this year with the Hall of Fame. We'll continue to do more next year. And I would be remiss if I didn't say a special thank you to the most dedicated and loyal people I was fortunate enough to work with in my years here. Ethan Wilson was on the call, and Shannon Ford was up in heaven looking down on us. So thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Ethan, for helping me get through what I got through. It's all yours, sir.
Nice.
Thank you for the kind words, Jay.
Yes, sir.
At this point, we'd like to open it up for questions. So if you'd like to use the raise your hand tab at the bottom of the screen, we'll take a minute to compile some questions.
Wow, good job, Jay.
Well said.
First question comes from Ed Randall.
congratulations to all of you. As another New York guy, I want to ask Gary and Howie about what you remember about your first Mets game.
Thank you, Gary.
I honestly don't remember my first Mets game. My father was a Yankee fan, so the first couple of games I went to as a kid were in the Bronx. There was another father in the neighborhood who used to pile kids into the back of the station wagon and take them to Mets games. And we did that a few times. It was probably 65 or 66 when I went to my first game, but I honestly don't remember the first one. What I do remember is the experience at Shea, where you would be on that narrow concourse and then you'd walk out through the tunnel and see the expanse of green. And I know that so many kids have expressed the same thought about just how enormous and how green the field was. And that was always my first impression of Shea Stadium. And I've never forgotten that feeling, because it just makes you feel as though the world of baseball is so all encompassing, and it emphasizes how difficult the game is to play, the size of the outfield and the amount of ground that players have to cover. And to me, it was almost a welcoming feeling coming into the ballpark and being part of that large whole.
I'll tell you what, I have an eternal connection to the very first Met game I ever went to. I'll tell you the date and the reason for the connection. First of all, some of you know I am a gigantic Beatles fan, okay? So that actually ties into this, because my first game with my dad was at Polo Grounds on July 6th of 1962. Now, I didn't realize this until years later, but July 6th, back in, I believe, 1957, is when a couple of people met for the first time. Their names were John Lennon and Paul McCartney. That was on the same date as the first date that I went to a Mets game. But that's not all of it. That's not even the biggest part of it. My wife, Barbara, and I would meet on July 6th of 1986. And that season turned out pretty well, didn't it? So I have a deep connection to that date and to that game, because in that game on July 6th, 62, Gil Hodges hit the final home run of his major league career, as it would turn out. We didn't know it at the time, of course. Rod Kniehl hit the first grand slam in Mets history. And a weird thing happened during that game. The Cardinals were issuing an intentional walk. I think Bobby Shantz was the pitcher, and a guy named Carl Sawatsky was the catcher. And to this day, I don't remember if they called it a wild pitch or a pass ball, but the ball went to the backstop and a run scored. So I've always had this emotional connection to the 4-pitch intentional walk. None of this just go right to first place nonsense. Throw 4 and see what happens. So, yeah, I remember my first game vividly on July 6th, 1962.
Thank you both.
Next question is from Kevin Mahar.
Yeah, Hojo, I'm Kevin Marr from News 12 Long Island. Out, kind of piggybacking off what Howie has said about how the '69 Mets made a difference in his life. How much do you enjoy stories from fans where they say the '80s made a difference in my life?
I love it. Kevin. I don't know. It's so hard to describe. I've always been a fan of history, and so baseball history especially is very interesting to me. And just hearing all the guys talk about their past and how they got connected to the Mets as kids, and just to be a part of Major League Baseball. Like Al said, you just never know like what's going to happen. But I just like listening to it. I love history, and the Mets history is a rich one, and hasn't been mined yet like it should. And I think that's what Steve and Alex are doing. They're gonna try to mine that, and they're gonna promote it, because the fans, they love the history of the Mets, even though it may not always be winning, right? They love the history of the Mets, and that is something that needs to be tapped into. And I'm glad and grateful that they are.
Thank you. Next question is from Mark Roseman.
Hey guys, congratulations to everyone. I have one for Gary and Howie and one for Hojo. Gary and Howie, you guys are basically, for people of a certain age like myself, the bridge from the Holy Trinity of Ralph, Bob, and Lindsay. The three of them went into the Mets Hall of Fame together. Does it add added significance to the two of you that you are both going in at the same time? And for Hojo, you're the ninth guy from the '86 Mets, if you include, Frank Cashin and Davey Johnson, to go into the Hall. What does that say about that team? Thank you, guys.
Well, let me start by saying the fact that Gary and I are going in together is so special because, we're kindred spirits, obviously. And there's nothing that makes me prouder. And I know, Gary, you get this too, is when people will come up to us now and then and say that you guys are to our generation what Lindsay, Bob, and Ralph were to yours. And to have had those guys in my eyes and ears for the better part of 7 months every year meant that they came to be almost like family. And to feel and experience that connection between the fan base and ourselves is one that is very, very real to us because we lived it through Lindsay, Bob, and Ralph. And so I know, Gary, you no doubt hear the same things. And that association for me is as mind-boggling as it is humbling.
Well, I've been incredibly blessed over the course of 34 years to work with fantastic partners. I mean, I mentioned 15 years with Bob Murphy, which just felt like a surreal experience. And obviously my connection with Ron and Keith is a wonderful one. And we've had a fabulous partnership over the last 17 years. But I have to say the two most special years I've ever spent on the air were the two that I spent in 2004 and 2005 working with Howie. And I have to say, going into it, I wasn't sure how it was going to work because we have so many of the same sensibilities. And sometimes what makes a broadcast work is having, different points of view. But I'll tell you that those 2 years, I smiled probably more than I have my entire life because we have the ability to finish each other's sentences because our experiences are so similar. And I would not trade those 2 years for anything. I feel such an incredible kinship with Howie. We didn't know each other growing up, but we had similar experiences growing up in terms of our connection to the Mets. And to be able to share a booth with him was one of the great experiences of my life. And I am so, so pleased that we get to, be in this class for the Hall of Fame together because it wouldn't have felt right any other way.
Hashtag, by the way, he loved it so much he ran the heck out of there after a couple of years because he couldn't take working with me every day. That's the truth. But we had some fun, and the one thing I learned is that, and it's a long story, but Gary, I could not sell Gary on the concept of circus peanuts.
Well, the question about the '86 Mets, it's hard to put into words what that team has provided for all the players that were on that team. And it's sad that some of them aren't here anymore, but they're looking down at us as well. And I'm just glad that I was a part of it. I mean, the whole thing that I ever thought about doing was trying to just play my role. Whatever Davey asked me to do, just do it. And I was very happy to do so. And so, just to be a fly in the wall in there sometimes was a wild time, and I enjoyed it. Jay, I know some things about you in there. I was pretty good. We're not going to go into, but maybe for another book, right, Jay?
No more books.
But yeah, it was cool. It's a brotherhood. That year was a brotherhood, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you, guys. Mike Puma, you're next.
Hey, question for Al. I think he's a little neglected over there, so I'll get him.
I'm good. I'm enjoying it. I feel like I'm listening to one of the telecasts here. This is great.
And you touched on this with me before a little bit, but I just wanted to ask you, what was your disappointment that you didn't get to finish your career with the Mets. You know, yeah, I think you ended up going to the Marlins, the Yankees, and I know you would have liked have that opportunity to finish with the Mets.
Yes, big time. I was very upset. I wanted to finish a Met. I thought it would have been unbelievably cool. I needed 5 more wins to be behind Tom Seaver, Jerry Kuzman, and Dwight Gooden. Got 7 years to play for the team I rooted for. It wasn't going to be. I had some other ideas. I was mad at Omar Minaya for many years. We are now good friends. The other reason why I mentioned that, because I do like Omar. And I wanted to finish a Met, period, exclamation point. And it mattered to me, but didn't get that opportunity. But there's reasons for everything, right? In life, I guess that's how I look at it. And, you know, it's never a straight line. And I'm appreciative of the time that I did have as a Met. And I'll share this story. When I was with the Marlins in 1997, the owner decided to get rid of everybody. And I was one of the last players for the Marlins to be traded. And I think it's rather coincidental for a couple reasons. June 3rd, the Toronto Blue Jays will be in. I spent 7 years up in Toronto. But the general manager at the time, Dave Dombrowski, called me the day before the trade and said, I'm not promising you anything, but I have comparable prospect offers, and I'm wondering if you had a preference. And he said, I got an offer from St. Louis Cardinals, and I got an offer from the New York Mets. And this is Dave. I said, Dave, are you kidding? And then I go through the whole, I was a Mets fan. I grew up in New Jersey, and that'd be amazing. And I know it's in the same division. He's like, look, I'm not promising anything, but I'm glad you told me. It's not the 24 hours. I get traded. Steve Phillips, calls me, and, I become a Met. Literally, I think it was a week or so before whether I was going to go to Melbourne or Port St. Lucie. So, I don't know what Hojo's, how as players, you just never know, right?
Yeah.
Free agency trades, however it takes you. But I couldn't have been more grateful for Dave Dombrowski to do such thing, to call and reach out to a player, and for it to work out the way it did. So I'm grateful to 7 years, Mike.
The other thing is, I think when you retired, you probably you had a chance to go in the SNY booth. Do you ever regret that you didn't jump at that opportunity?
Well, I actually heard Gary Cohen didn't want me in the booth, so that was really the end story on that. No, so in a nutshell, I am great. I'm lucky, grateful, and blessed to have played when I did and to make what I made. And finishing with the Yankees, they had a package that was attractive for somebody who wanted to be around the game, but not in day to day. And again, I thank God every day that it turned out the way it did. So the Yankees offered me something that was manageable after me playing for 19 years in the big leagues. And John Littner and Fred, when I had lunch, when they were showing SNY Studios, and this is what it's going to look like, they had different ideas. They didn't like the idea of 20-game package here and a 20, 30-game package there. So that was really the difference when I had lunch with Fred and John Littner.
Thank you.
Next question is from Abby.
I have a question for Howie and Gary. Other than the circus peanuts, what have you guys learned from each other and sort of picked up along the way?
Well, Gary, if you don't mind me starting this, I have to tell you that I learned more about how to broadcast baseball on radio in the 2 years that I worked with Gary than in all of the years before or since, because I didn't have Gary's training. I wasn't working in the minor leagues. I didn't hone my craft that way. I wouldn't say I necessarily fell into it, but there are always a series of somewhat serendipitous circumstances that land us in various places. And that's how I wound up first in the Mets TV booth and then later on in radio. But you could not find two more, and Gary can attest to this, I'm sure, disparate jobs in sports broadcasting than baseball on radio and baseball on television. Sorry, Gary, but baseball on TV is easy. You got Bayless. He working for it.
It's a layup.
Right, it is.
It's a layup.
Absolute layup. Baseball and radio is a whole different thing. And no one, and I feel very comfortable saying this, no one has ever delivered a baseball game to a listener on radio any more clearly, in any more detailed fashion, and any more vividly than Gary. And so I basically watched him perform his craft on radio for 2 years and picked up a lot of different things in terms of describing detail and never finishing a call until you've covered everything. And it's a long story to get into the specifics. I won't bore you with them, but Gary was my professor for 2 years, and it just couldn't have worked out any better. And I can't thank Gary enough.
Well, and I would say conversely, Howie brought that mentality that made him such a star on Mets Extra, the ability to tell a story, to inject humor. And I think that I picked up a lot from that. I for a lot of years, I was a little bit more focused, straight ahead, call the game. But I think that working with Howie, I developed a little bit more humanity on the air because that's more of his style. So I think that as Howie might have learned from me, I think I learned from him as well. And I think that has also served me well at moving over to TV, where it is more of a storytelling and background medium as opposed to calling direct play-by-play. So I think we definitely learned from each other and have both become better broadcasters for having worked together.
Agreed.
And I have one more for Howard and Al. Jay's been in the background for so much throughout Mets history. What does he mean to the organization and to some of the former greats of the organization?
Go ahead, Al, follow you.
So Jay is the Hall of Famer for the Mets organization. Somebody who has loved what he's done for many years. I don't know a player that didn't care for, respect, and like Jay. I don't know of anybody who had a problem with him. I love Jay more than deserving. I think he should have I actually think he should have a little statue at the facility. I feel that highly of him. I really do. There's nobody more
enough material.
There's nobody more dedicated to the Mets organization. I could say that since when did you start, Jay?
1850.
1850?
1850.
I mean,
1980, yeah.
I don't know. Hojo, I don't know how you feel, but I love Jay, and this is well deserved.
Oh, yeah.
I hope he gets a statue someday. I feel that highly about him.
Well, I can't. I just echo that. He's special. Jay was the first guy that talked to me when I got traded to the Mets from the Tigers. And he called me right away and just instantly felt at home. Jay's one of the most humble guys you'll ever meet. He doesn't really toot his own horn at all. He just does his job. A lot of times in the background, but he's well-deserved to be a part of this. He's as much as the Mets as any part of it that I can think of, including from the locker room. So he's somebody that we had to be in daily contact with. There were times where I would say something I shouldn't have, and he would have to clean up my mess. So I'm eternally grateful for that, Jay. And he's always been one of those guys that's very encouraging, always has a positive thing to say. And I just appreciate that about him.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question is from Jerry Beach.
Hey guys, Howard, this is a question for you, kind of following up on what Mike asked Al. You finished up with Colorado and the Cubs, and then you were able to come back for a while as a coach with the team and organization. But what's it mean to you to kind of circle back and to now be in the Hall of Fame when you didn't get the chance to finish your career with the team like I imagine you probably wanted to? Thanks.
Sure thing. So it was tough to leave. I didn't want to leave at the time. I had gotten hurt in LA my last game. I was stealing second base and I slid. I had this wrist guard on my right hand, and I it was in, I think, late August or early September, and I put my hand down and basically tore my thumb apart. And that was the end of my season, and ended up being my end of my career with the Mets. I wish that I could have come back and played one more year, but like Al said, you just don't know where things turn. Things change constantly, and you just, as a player, you have your things that you keep inside that personally that you'd like to see happen in your career, but very few guys get to walk away from their career when they want. And I was fortunate the Mets in '97 let me come back to spring training and try to make the team. Bobby Valentine was the manager, and to the last day I was there, and I knew it was time to go. And so I felt grateful to have that opportunity to put the uniform on again for a few days and give it a shot. But yeah, the Mets are in my heart. They're in my body. It's part of who we are, our DNA, I guess. And all the guys that ever put that uniform on, we share a brotherhood. And the guys in the booth are no different. And we listen to you guys, and we appreciate it. We're old enough to know sports on the radio and how important that is. And it's a lost art with a lot of young people. And I think they're missing out when they don't hear the radio as being a baseball fan.
Thanks, Howard.
Nice.
Thank you. Mark Roseman.
Yeah, this one's for Al. Al, you take a look at your career, especially you said that you grew up a Mets fan, and you take a look at some of the things that you dealt with, the Reds game, obviously, a Subway Series, the post 9/11 games, and you throw in the fact that you sang back up to Springsteen on Glory Days at Shea. Where does this, rank with all of those, past, great moments you've had?
Well, it was Rosalita, and I banged the tambourine. I had about 9 beers in me. I was petrified. So that was the scariest moment. No. Well, I still think if we win Game 1 of the World Series, instead of having 3, now 4 of my teammates from the 98 to 2001 era, we'd have more. Not that I'm bitter or anything, but that would have been nice to win Game 1. It would have made 2000 World Series a little more interesting. I think the Yankees were squirming a little bit. I think every facet of that postseason in 2000, and then leading up to, of course, we lost, but I remember we clinched early against St. Louis for the LCS, and we were waiting on I think Seattle and the Yanks, and hey, who would you rather play? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like a Subway Series, it hasn't happened in 47 years. Brooklyn Dodgers, Yankees, and that whole thing. I'm like, bring them on, man. We want to. So I think where I was mentally and physically and how I was feeling, like it was just it was so cool. Like every facet of that World Series. Of course, it didn't end the way I would have liked it. So I think that really snapshot. And then, of course, the year before, 99, you mentioned the Mets game. Anytime you have a compelling moment, obviously winner moves on, loser goes home. That one really stands out. And I know from Mets fans, I to this day, I still get some nice comments about it.
Thank you, Al. So finally, I'm going to put one person on the spot here who deeply knows all 5 people and is on the Zoom. Ed Coleman, we're going to open up your line.
Hi, Ed.
Hello, boys. I was
Hi,
just
Ed.
observing. It's it gives me a great thrill with 2 guys that I worked with and loved working with, and 2 guys that I loved talking to, and I mean that sincerely. Always had time for me, and I always appreciated that too. And in addition, Jay Horowitz, who does deserve a statue as well. I think Jay knows how much I love him and how much he's meant to me over the years. But it's great to see all you guys. It's a great honor for you, and the most important thing, it's very well deserved for all of you. Absolutely. So,
thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thanks, Eddie. Thank you, man. Very nice. Thank you.
We really appreciate everyone joining us today on the Zoom, and we look forward to June 3rd when the ceremony will take place in a pregame ceremony before the Blue Jays game at Citi Field. Thank you again for everyone.
Good job, E.
Thank you.
Good job,
Thank
Ethan.
you.
Thanks, guys.
See you,
Guys,
boys.
see y'all.
Thank you, everybody.
Can't wait. See ya.